Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is video number 3 I'm making today for you on the 30th of November. You're probably watching this December something. This is on the quadratic formula. And to give you just an idea of what we're talking about and why, the last few videos we were talking about solving quadratic functions. And we talked about how we can factor to find our zeros, and that would be these things here where our parabola crosses the x-axis. So we can factor to find the zeros. If factoring isn't easy and we're in vertex form, then we can solve our equation if that's convenient. But if that gets really ugly, we can use a third method, and that's the quadratic formula. And so the notes we did so far you should have, and if you don't have these, go back and watch those videos. That says part 1 and part 2 for solving quadratic functions. And you should have 2 or 3 examples where we were solving the equations to find what our zeros are. There's another page you probably have, that was video 2, I believe. And that was also from video 2. And so now we're in video 3. And so the third way we can solve quadratic functions is by using the quadratic formula. And so, for example, if I have x squared plus 6x equals 7. Now sometimes you might get equations like that, and this is almost in standard form, but not quite. We want this to equal 0, not 7. So if I subtract 7 from both sides, then I get x squared plus 6x minus 7 equals 0. Now I can factor this. 7 is prime, so I can only get that by doing 7 times 1. And if that's a negative 7 and that's a positive 6, then 1's negative and the other number is positive. So if I'm thinking about factoring this, then I know that I have to multiply negative 7. I have more positives because my answer is positive there. So I can factor that fairly quickly. And 7 plus negative 1 gives me positive 6x's. Negative 7 is what I multiplied to, so I'm good. So my factored form gives me f of x equals x plus 7 times x plus negative 1. And so I know that my solutions, or my roots, or my zeros, or the x-intercepts, you can find all of that by just setting this equal to 0. So we're going to say 0 equals x plus 7, x plus negative 1, or x minus 1. And so to make that become 0, 1 is 0, then the whole thing has to equal 0. So this would be negative 7. And then this is positive 1 plus negative 1 equals 0. So I have my 2 solutions. So sometimes we can have standard form and easily factor it to get my zeros. But sometimes we can't. So for example, this one I want to use my factored form. But this one I have x squared plus 7x minus 5 equals 0. So notice I have an odd term here. So completing the square is going to be ugly with fractions. It's possible, but I wouldn't want to use that. And then multiplying to get to 5 is only 1 times 5. And if it's negative, then one of them is negative, the other one's positive, and there's no way that I can, with easy integers, be able to factor this. So I'm not going to. I'm going to use the quadratic formula. So I'm going to put this as ugly to factor or complete the square. So use the quadratic formula. So this is when I would want to use that. So the quadratic formula is this. We're going to do just a little bit down here. The quadratic formula says the solutions are x equals, Remember, that's where you're crossing on the x-axis, is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I have that memorized because I was forced to memorize it with the song, and it goes like this. The opposite of lowercase b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that's from the Pop Goes the Weasel song. But I memorized that, so I cannot see this and not think that song. So again, I always think the opposite of lowercase b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if you could memorize that and you come sing it to me, I will give you extra credit. I don't give you extra credit very often, but if you can memorize that song and sing this to me with these words, then I will give you extra credit. All right, so let's see who watches this video and who does what I say. So go for it. You can watch this whenever you want. Remember, all my videos are on YouTube also, so you can just go get there, subscribe to my channel. It's there for you. So we're going to use this only when, so use when given, or when you can get standard form. So that's if I have f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's when you're going to use it. So this b is that b. Same number, 4 times a is here, c is there, 2 times a is there. And that means our x will equal that. All right, so here's how this works. I have 2 examples for you and one for you to try. So the first one we're going to do, we have f of x equals x squared plus 7x minus 5. So now I always want to make sure I know what my a is. I always list out what a, b, c is first. So a in this case is 1, b is this term next to the 7, or next to the x, which is 7, and c is negative 5. So those are my a, b, and my c. And then I sing my song and I write out my formula. Opposite of lowercase b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. There's my formula, and let's plug in the numbers. So I have the opposite of b, which is 7, so I put negative 7, plus or minus the square root. B is 7, so 7 squared, or minus, well not plus, minus 4, a is 1, c is negative 5. All over 2, and a is 1. So now I have this thing to simplify, and so your calculator is going to be very helpful for you. Notice I'm going down, and I'm giving myself some space. So negative 7 stays the same, plus or minus the square root. 7 squared is 49, minus 4 times 1 is 4, times negative 5 is negative 20, and minus a negative is adding a positive, so it's plus 20, divided by 2 times 1 is just 2. Now I want to simplify this again. X equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root. 49 plus 20 is 60, and divide by 2. Oops, 69, not 60. All right, so I'm going to look at the number 69 and think if I can simplify that more. If I can, if it's a perfect square, then awesome. Some of our examples it is. If it's not a perfect square and I can't simplify, then I'll leave it alone. So I know that 69 is 6 plus 9, which is 15, and 15 divided by 3 is 5, so I can divide this by 3. I can divide this sum by 3. So if I start to prime factor this, I get 3 times 23, but 3 and 23 are primes, but there's no pairs of primes, so I can't simplify this at all. So I'm going to leave it alone. as it is. And then I have this plus and this minus. So I have two answers, just like I had before in the last two videos. And that's because my parabola crosses the x-axis in two places. So I have negative 7, x equals negative 7 plus the square root of 69 divided by 2. And then I always use a little dividing thing. And then I have x equals negative 7 minus the square root of 69 and divide it by 2. So now I'm going to just take my calculator and I'm going to calculate. And I'm going to just plug in that straight to my calculator. So I have negative 7 plus the square root, remember second, x squared, square root, 69 equals, and then I want to take that and divide it by 2. And so that gives me this answer. So on this side, x is about equal to 0 and 65. Let's go to the thousands place. 653. So 653 thousandths. And on this side, I do the same thing again. But now this time I have negative 7 minus square root 69. Gives me that. Divide by 2 gives me that. So this one is x is about equal to negative 7.653. So my two solutions are right here. X equals this and x equals that. So once you've done that, I always like to know if I'm right or not, and I can confirm using Desmos. So I'm going to get my computer out. I'm going to type in that equation. So that equation was x squared, and then it was plus 7x, and then it was minus 5. So there's my graph here, and when you use Desmos, it will actually tell you the zeros. And so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. If you put your cursor over where, whoops, stop moving. There it is. So if you put your cursor over where those zeros are, right here, you click on it, it tells you that x is negative 7.653, which is what we got, comma 0. And over on this 0, it's 0.653, comma 0, which is what we got also. So I'm like, yeah, this parabola looks like this. My zeros were correct. There's no way that I would have figured that out just by estimating and looking at my graph. I'd have to use Desmos by graphing it, or I'd have to use the quadratic formula. And those are estimates again. So that's the first one. The next one we're going to do is a little bit more because we have a 3 as my a term. So I have f of x equals 3x squared plus 14x minus 5. And so a lot of students see this and they're like, oh, there's a 3 there. So factoring right off the bat, not what I want to do. So I'm not going to factor it. Maybe advanced students could try to factor complete the square, but that's really ugly. I'm not going to even bother with that. I'm going to go straight to using my quadratic formula. So I'm going to write down my a, my b, my c first. A is 3, b is 14, c is negative 5. X equals my formula, opposite of lowercase b, plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. Guys, I literally sing that in my head if I don't sing it out loud every time I write it out. So now I have x equals, plug in my numbers, 14, so the opposite of that is negative 14, plus or minus square root, b is 14 squared, minus 4 times 3 times negative 5, divided by 2 times 3. Wow, that is ugly to write, but it simplifies. So take your time and simplify carefully. x equals negative 14 plus or minus the square root. Use your calculator. 14 times 14 gives you 196. So I have 196 minus 4 times 3 times negative 5 gives you negative 60, but this is minus negative, so plus 60 divided by 2 times 3 gives you 6. And I'm going to keep going. X equals negative 14 plus or minus the square root. 196 plus 60 gives you 256 divided by 6. And again, try to simplify that first. See if you can. If I go square root 256, what? It is. It's a perfect square. That makes my life really easy. The radical's gone. So that gives me 16. So x equals negative 14 plus or minus 16 divided by 6. That does happen a lot. Okay? This turns into that. Now, I have two solutions. I have where x equals negative 14 plus 16 divided by 6, and x equals negative 14 minus 16 divided by 6. So here I go. Negative 14 plus 16 gives me positive 2 sixths. And positive 2 sixths, I know, divide by 2 gives me 1/3. And you can throw that in your calculator, but I know that that is about equal to 0.333. Repeating forever, actually. And then on this side, negative 14 minus 16 gives me negative 30 divided by 6, and I know that is negative 5. So there's my two solutions. So again, let's throw this in Desmos and see what happens. This is a 3x squared plus 14x, and then I still have that minus 5 is the same. And so I look at my graph, and this point right there, there's that negative 5, and there's my 0.33, so I'm correct. Okay, so we're going to do a lot more practice. I know this video is a little bit longer than 15 minutes. Thank you for bearing with me. I will give you one more question to practice in the quiz, and that'll be all we do. For the notes, we will continue working on this in class. As always, let me know when you have questions. Okay, have a great afternoon. It's Friday for me. Okay, bye.